From the Darkness is a first-person psychological horror game that follows an unnamed protagonist as they visit the Soviet-era apartment of their deceased grandfather to retrieve the family photo album. The game is available on Steam. Atmosphere. The game's perspective is a little fish-eyed and seems unstable, which makes the whole game feel like a fever dream, something you only groggily remember as your vision sways slowly around. And the stairs that led up to the apartment, despite containing nothing, got ominous thanks to the low hum that persists throughout most of the game. These two things build the foundation of the atmosphere. Entering the apartment and the atmosphere gets increasingly worse, with the immense dread building from the darkness that sits in front of you, combined with a strange, unshakable sensation that there's something lurking in it. The atmosphere continually gets worse, with the game expertly presenting extremely unnerving things that you can't do anything about. Instead of presenting the feeling of being watched, you know that you are being watched, and there's nothing you can do about it. From the Darkness presents its darkness in such a foreboding way that spending any time in it feels completely intolerable. The atmosphere changes up and down by presenting more and more unsettling scenarios one after another, with reality seemingly going out the window as you traverse its cramped, run-down nightmare. So much so that it makes the 40-minute game feel like you've been playing it for an eternity. That's one Harry Mason. Scares. The game's scares start with the subtle and go all the way to the extreme, beginning by showing you things that make you question what you saw, whilst periodically messing with you, turning the lights out and closing the doors. The overwhelming feeling that you aren't alone is confirmed time and time again as you briefly see something flash past a doorway. The game keeps putting the player in uncomfortable scenarios that generate a very real fear, and then shattering the already sky-high tension with a jump scare. The game only has 1 or 2 jump scares, but they're completely terrifying. The game is mostly made of scripted events, and it's such a well-executed haunted house ride that it barely leaves you any time to process what's going on before something else happens. That's 2 Harry Masons. Sound design. The game doesn't really use much music at all, electing instead to use various levels of deep humming or infrasound that never fails to give headphone users a sense of unease. The sound effects are all claustrophobic to match the tiny apartment, but they don't change when you switch environments, which briefly takes you out of the moment. The sound effects themselves are generic but used very well, with a standout example being the sound of a child crying that changes pitch as you get closer to the source, sinking down to a disturbing moan, and finally a demonic growl. There's no voice acting since there's no voices, but the directional audio for the sound effects is fantastic and used to help solve the puzzles in the game. It works flawlessly. Overall, there's very little used in From the Darkness, but what is used very well. That's 3 Harry Masons. Gore. The game presents some unsettling bodies, and thanks to the engine, or maybe a design choice, all the corpses in the game have a very greasy look to them, like they're made of wax, and it's somehow unpleasant. There's bathtubs full of blood and some gory puzzles to solve, but it's a small part of the game. It never takes center stage, but it's still gross to see. That's 4 Harry Masons. Story. An unnamed character arrives at his grandfather's apartment to reclaim the family photo album. The game's story is deliberately vague, with your character being unnamed and everything else, besides gathering your grandfather's photo album, being a mystery. There's no explanation on anything for what's happening, or if whatever is haunting your grandfather's apartment is even your grandfather or something else. But the game doesn't seem like it would be any better if these riddles were answered, and even having a single diary entry will probably break up the game's pace. The mystery only seems to add more to the experience, and wondering what really happened at the end is the cherry on the cake. Making the final score 5 out of 5 Harry Masons. From the Darkness is a terrifying game that's atmosphere and scares are completely nerve-wracking. It's not a long game at all, but time seems to slow down when you play it. It does such a good job with every single aspect of its makeup that it's genuinely very impressive. Again, I'd like to remind you this whole thing is down to my opinion of horror games, and if you don't share this opinion, then that's cool, I get it. I'd like to point out that whilst I got the photo album, I was unable to leave, and advise you don't either. There will be more horror reviews in the pipeline, and thanks for watching. Now let's go check out Bumps in the middle of the night. Peace.